Ever since I was a little girl, I've always loved listening to stories. But my favorite kind of stories weren't the ones that were make-believe, the ones woven into the fabric of fairy tales. My favorite stories were the ones where my family members were actually the heroes of the story, the ones that told my family history. As a Pakistani that was raised by a Pakistani father and a Bangladeshi mother, my family's history in these stories helped me understand my own identity, as well as myself in the context of our historical timeline. My favorite character in all these stories, the real main protagonist, was my grandmother, my Nani, or who we all called Nan. As my mother and my khalas would always tell me, Nan was amazing. She was a sharpshooter, she was a progressive feminist, she was a revolutionary. She never backed down from what she believed in. In 1949, Nan became one of the first commanders of the Women National Guard that was set up by Begum Liaquat Ali Khan soon after partition for New Pakistan. Nan would go door to door to convince women to join the National Guard. It was there that she learned how to shoot a rifle, which in 1971 kept our family safe when East Pakistan was fighting for independence to become Bangladesh. My mother would tell me how Nan would actually hide her rifle under the bed in case a Pakistani soldier would show up in the middle of the night. Not that she could really defend herself with her little rifle, but that's what she did. Nan was someone who was larger than life. She was a warrior. And she was someone who was the author of her own story and never let the universe set the rules for her. Not even in 1958 when my Nana passed away, leaving her as a widow just at 36 years old to care for 8 children. As I grew older, I realized that the stories that I heard about my Nani and that my Nani told me were values that I wanted to live my life by. I wanted to be the author of my own story. I wanted to be someone that wasn't just a character in a story that someone else wrote for me. And as I got older, I realized that the way that she lived her life could be the mantra that I lived my life by. And the mantra is that if you want to live a life that matters, if you want to be truly remembered, you have to do things that matter. So what does that actually mean? Because when we talk about do what you love, a lot of people hear that, but that doesn't really mean anything. But it's an action. It's a call to action to actually do things that are bigger than yourself. A couple years ago, in 2008, I was working and living in the United States at a job that I hated, but I was not necessarily doing what I loved, but I was doing a job. In the meantime, these were the headlines of Pakistan in the news, calling us the most dangerous place on earth. And as a Pakistani living in the United States, I would get increasingly more angry seeing the headlines that were dominating the news. That was the reality, that there were bombings happening, there was violence happening on the ground. And yet, no one in the West was actually hearing the amazing stories of changemakers, of artists, of filmmakers, of people that were doing incredible things that were the unheard stories of Pakistan. I could have been someone that sat back and allowed that to happen and just watched everything unfold in front of me and did nothing to change the narrative. But I decided to get up and do something. In 2008, I launched a blog called CHUP, or Changing Up Pakistan, which served to tell the unheard stories of Pakistan that no one else was hearing in the Western media. So while I was doing current affairs analysis, I was also doing interviews with amazing filmmakers. I was covering changemakers on the ground. I was covering stories that people didn't even talk about in the news, transgender issues, issues related to the textile industry. I was allowing it to be a platform for young Pakistanis to also be able to tell their story in their voice. As a result, CHUP got a lot of it got a lot of traction. At the same time, I was meeting a lot of young Pakistanis through my work that were doing amazing things on the ground, that had amazing ideas to change the world around them. But they often couldn't get the resources or the capital to start. And when we looked at the statistics, again, it comes from a negative perspective. 60% of Pakistan's population lives under $2 a day. That's the bottom of the pyramid. People that live in poverty. 50% of enrolled students drop out before grade 5 in Pakistan. So while the problems and the challenges are enormous, there's also a huge amount of opportunity. The fact that 2/3 of Pakistan's population is under 30 years old, a lot of whom are sitting in this audience today. The fact that we have 130 mobile phone subscribers. The fact that we now actually have 3G and 4G. So what I realized was that rather than just see Pakistan for its negatives, I could actually see the opportunity and the positives. And I could take that and see that opportunity and help support entrepreneurs write their own story, not but just by being the author of mine, but enabling others to also be the authors of theirs. In 2011, I launched a company called Invest to Innovate. I decided to finally take the entrepreneurial plunge, which also stands for Eye to Eye, which is a song that we all know. Though Tahir Shah should probably be our chief hair officer. So Invest to Innovate served to support entrepreneurs in Pakistan that were doing incredible things to change the environment around them, that are trying to change the statistics that we've seen, the negative statistics of Pakistan, into positive opportunities. People that were doing incredible things using technology to detect counterfeit medication, people that were using education technology to serve low-income students in slum areas in Karachi. But what we're trying to do is give these entrepreneurs the tools that they needed to survive, how they could be the authors of their story, so they could do things that mattered, giving them access to amazing mentors and entrepreneurs that were successful in Pakistan that wanted to support them in this growth. So we've been running for about 2 years, and it's been an incredible journey. It's been something that's been really empowering for myself. I feel my Nani with me every time I'm doing something that's particularly brave. But entrepreneurship is something that a lot of people think is really glamorous. But the reality of it is that it's extremely, extremely difficult. You often sleep in airports waiting for a flight to take off. There's an enormous amount of sacrifice. You give up a job that pays you well to really not be paid anything until things happen. But if you're doing what you love, it doesn't actually feel like sacrifice. Because if you're doing something that matters, this is what you think about. You're not thinking about the negatives as much as you're thinking about the amazing people that you get to work with, the people that are trying to also leave their legacy behind, and the amazing community that you can build around that. About 3 years ago, my Nani passed away. One of the last times that I was with her, in this picture actually, I had just spent the last few hours in Dhaka with her, peppering her with questions. I wanted to record her amazing stories. I said, people need to know about this. And so she did it with me. She was telling me her stories. She was actually really flattered that people were giving her attention. She was quite the drama queen, Nani. So she decided after a while that she was really tired. Her eyes started to close. She asked if she could take a nap and if I could walk her to her room. So we walked to her room, and as she lay down in bed, she looked up at me, her eyes large and magnified by her glasses, her hands still holding my hand with the strength of the folk heroine that was immortalized in those stories. She asked me, "Will you remember me?" And I looked down at her, and I thought back on her amazing, colorful life, the fact that she was always in the driver's seat, the fact that she never let the universe set any rules for her, the fact that she instilled so much inspiration in me, and I interwove my fingers with hers, an overlap of young and old, and I said, always. Even now and today, I think about my Nan on an almost regular basis. And one thing that I always think about is that doing something that matters and leaving a legacy behind, being remembered, doesn't just mean that you have to do the big things. It can include little, small acts of kindness. It can mean doing something for yourself and being able to pursue that journey. It doesn't necessarily mean becoming an entrepreneur, but exploring your passion. And that's the lesson that my Nani left me. Thank you.